is Paul Helkiotis. I'm the NORD Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. I'd like to talk to you today about some special town meeting rezoning articles that we have that will be in front of town meeting members at a special town meeting scheduled for June 14th. Many of you are aware that we had a special town meeting last February, and during the discussion at that town meeting, a decision was made by town meeting members to send the articles back to the planning board and me to give some further study and to address some issues that had been identified as during that discussion. As a little bit of background, we've been working on rezoning the Route 1 corridor for the last 2 years. We had identified several problems with the Route 1 corridor, 4 different zoning districts with different sets of regulations for building height, for uses that are allowed, different lot sizes. And we decided that it would be best to try to create one zoning district that stretched the 4-mile length from Walpole to Westwood that had one set of zoning regulations with regulatory continuity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happened since the February special town meeting and bring you up to speed on what the planning board and I did to work on this to address the concerns that were raised then. So back in February, these articles were discussed and town meeting members did send them back to the planning board for further study. The following actions were taken since February. We identified several issues that came up for discussion. One was traffic. The other was buffer zones to protect residential property owners from the commercial activity. There were 5 single-family homes that were put into the Boston Providence Highway District, and that the folks that lived there expressed an interest in being removed out of it to stay in the residential zone. And the mixed-use overlay districts that had been proposed, there are 3 of them. We have separated those out from the main Route 1 corridor rezoning, and those will be acted on separately as separate articles. To address the traffic concerns, we hired a traffic engineer from a company called VHB that specializes in traffic engineering. They focused on how the mixed-use overlay districts would impact future traffic levels if it were to be approved by town meeting members. Included in the projections included in these projections were some traffic improvements that are scheduled by the state to be completed in the year 2025. This will take that intersection of University Ave, Everett Street, and Route 1 and expand it to provide additional turning and through lanes. This will increase the capacity of the intersection to handle traffic. And so we thought it would be important in modeling what the proposed mixed-use developments would do in terms of traffic to account for these planned infrastructure improvements to the intersection. We have a preliminary report that's been completed, and the planning board and I are in the process of reviewing that report. But what we could see from the analysis was a little bit of a mixed bag. Some projections showed obviously the traffic was going to increase at certain times of the day and under certain conditions. Other scenarios indicated that the traffic would stay about the same because of the different types of uses. And in some situations, it predicted that the traffic would actually slightly improve. So all 3 of those were part of these projections. As I said, we're reviewing those and we will release that information completed our review of the planning board. We wanted to respond to some of the concerns from some residents that backed up to the Route 1 corridor right now. Over the years, there has been some conflicts between commercial enterprises on Route 1 and the residential zoning districts that abut Route 1 and the folks that live in those residential homes. One of the issues that was flagged for us was trying to increase the setback between the new proposed Boston Providence Highway District and any other residential districts that it abuts. A commercial building within the new Boston Providence Highway District, whether it would be the district to the side of the building or to the rear of the building, any commercial building needs to be located at least 80 feet from any residential district lot line. It's also important to understand that most homes are set back from their rear lot line by 10 or 15 or 20 feet. And so from that 80 feet, which would be back or a sidewall of a commercial building where it abuts a residential district, we could add another 20 feet or maybe 30 feet, depending on the placement of the home on the lot. So that would effectively kind of increase that buffer. So when we talk about the buffer, it's between a commercial building and the residential district boundary. As part of what we did in the changes to the setback requirements, we put into place a 30-foot vegetated buffer that includes a 6-foot high solid fence. So from the residential district boundary toward the commercial district, that first 30 feet is going to be a vegetated buffer with evergreen vegetation tightly planted together to create a screen, and a 6-foot solid fence to help buffer any noise or headlights, other types of impacts between a commercial property and a residential property. It's also important for everyone to understand that these are zoning amendments, and zoning amendments are not retroactive. So for all effective purposes, things that are on the ground today, the location of buildings and landscaping and things, that will stay in place until a time when something is going to change on that property. If it's a new vacant, undeveloped piece of property, which there aren't many in Norwood on Route 1, they would be subject to these regulations. If they are approved, they would have to follow these new setback requirements. However, if a property is currently being used, there will be no changes until such time that that property is proposed for some kind of a redevelopment or expansion of the existing development. This slide helps to show graphically what those setback requirements are. As you can see, the building envelope, there's a 50-foot area from the back of that building. That area in back of a building is often used for a loading zone, parking, and a fire lane. So within 50 feet from the back of that building, they can pave it, and those activities that are commercially, typically part of a commercial operation, that can happen within that area. However, once you hit that 30-foot setback distance from the residential boundary district, that's where the landscaping and the fence will be required to help prevent any impacts to the neighboring residential property owners. During the February special town meeting, I was contacted by a town meeting member that lives on Dean Street, and she indicated that she was not happy that her house and 4 other homes right close to on Dean Street, close to Route 1, had been added into the Boston Providence Highway District. We understood her concerns, and those homes, all 5, have been removed from the Boston Providence Highway District. They'll stay in the general residence zone where they are currently. The land behind those homes, however, is part of the River Ridge development, part of Vanderbilt Business Park, and that property owned by River Ridge will be added to the Boston Providence Highway Zoning District. Other concerns that we heard about at town meeting related to the 3 proposed mixed-use overlay districts. We're proposing 3 of these mixed-use districts, one at the University Ave and Everett Street intersection at the northern gateway to the town, the second off of Manhattan Street near the traffic circle above Route 1, and the third one is the Vanderbilt Business Park mixed-use overlay district. Within these mixed-use overlay districts, there could be a combination of residential and commercial development. However, residential buildings, apartments, and condominiums are not going to be allowed to be built on Route 1, but they could be set back. When I talk about mixed-use development, there's really 2 major types that they're describing. One type of mixed-use development involves a commercial activity on the first floor, on the ground floor, and residential above and second, third, and fourth floors. Another type of mixed-use development is on a single lot or a combination of lots that are part of one project. There could be commercial buildings on the front facing Route 1, and behind that, there could be residential multifamily buildings for apartments or condominiums. As part of the feedback that we received in February, town meeting members didn't want to vote on the mixed-use overlay districts all at once to create those 3 districts. They seem to want to separate those out and have better control over which areas they would like to have rezoned for the mixed-use overlays. So we have separated those out into separate articles. What was Article 12 back in February, which contained the rezoning for the Boston Providence Highway zoning district and these 3 mixed-use overlay zones, have now been separated into 4 separate articles. The first article would create the Boston Providence Highway district. The second would create a mixed-use overlay district at the University Ave and Everett Street intersection. The third would be the Manhattan Street mixed-use overlay district, and the fourth, the Vanderbilt area mixed-use overlay district. We believe that this will give town meeting members better control over which of the mixed-use overlay districts they'd like to create along Route 1. This also reflects changes in the state law, the Zoning Act, Chapter 40A, that went into place back in January. Under the state law, the new rules said that to pass a zoning article that involves multifamily housing, the voting thresholds had been lowered from a 2/3 vote, which is the way most zoning is required to be approved in the state, to a simple majority vote. So by separating these 3 mixed-use overlay districts, the votes that will be required to approve those will be a simple majority vote, not the 2/3 vote that will be required for the main article to create the Boston Providence Highway District. So this is some changes that are underway under changes to the State Zoning Act, and we are complying with the guidance provided by the state on how zoning amendments should be crafted if they involve multifamily housing. We've created these to be set up into 3 separate articles, which works well with what the town meeting members wanted as well. Another problem that we addressed as part of this rezoning effort along Route 1 was to try to address the problem of lots that are in 2 or more zoning districts. Ideally, a piece of property should fall in one zoning district. However, over time, as zoning has changed and the boundaries have changed through votes of town meeting, sometimes those zoning district boundaries cut across a single lot, and creating a situation of a split lot that could have 2 or more zoning districts. Split lots are recognized as a problem in zoning. It is a problem because there are different sets of regulations that affect a single piece of property. Oftentimes when there's a split lot and somebody wants to do anything with the property, they need to go get relief from the zoning board for determination of which rules we're going to follow for the development of the property. And in some cases, you have rules that are created for residential properties, but the front of the property could be in a commercial use, and it creates a real problem. So we decided that as part of this rezoning, we would eliminate any split lots along the Boston Providence Highway District corridor. If a property is currently in residential use, we kept that property completely in a residential zoning district. As we went through parcel by parcel, if we found that a property was split between residential and commercial, if the property was in a commercial use, we put the whole property as a commercial district, in this case, the Boston Providence Highway District. So we made some judgment calls as we went through which properties along the boundary of the district would be affected. And we have addressed the split lot problem that has affected many of those properties going forward. Those are primarily the changes that to the bylaw amendments that we've been working on since the February special town meeting. I'd like to try to make some final closing remarks to explain why we think this is going to be good for the town of Norwood. As I indicated, the 4 separate zoning districts have different building heights, different lot sizes, different setback requirements. By creating one single zoning district for the whole 4-mile stretch of Route 1, that will bring some regulatory continuity to our to the corridor, so that it'll look the same, and regulations won't differ from property to property. We are going to require a 20-foot strip along the Route 1 road edge, and that 20-foot strip will need to be landscaped. It needs to include trees and a sidewalk to make Route 1 more pedestrian friendly. So it'll be more pedestrian friendly, and we will hopefully provide space for people to be able to walk and get from business to business as they if they work along Route 1, they'll be able to go get a sandwich a couple of doors down without having to jump into their car and travel. We've included regulations for open lot storage of automobiles, and under the new regulations, the only areas of town that would be allowed to have open lot storage of automobiles is going to be along the Route 1 corridor. This will prevent problems like we saw a couple of years ago with these open lot storage areas moving farther and farther away from Route 1 and causing traffic problems because of the railroad bridges being low. Car carriers would have had to travel all around town to get to some of these lots. So we thought it would be better to try to only allow open lot storage of vehicles along the Route 1 auto mile where they belong, to try to keep the impacts out of our residential neighborhoods. The mixed-use overlay districts will allow for additional housing to be constructed. Right now, there are very few vacant, undeveloped lots for new single-family homes to be built. And the housing market is very tight, with the cost of housing having skyrocketed over the last couple of years because a great supply of a great demand on homes for purchase, but not a big supply. By allowing mixed-use overlay districts, it will encourage condominium and apartment buildings to be built along the Route 1 corridor, where they really won't have a lot of impacts on our single-family residential neighborhoods. We've cited the mixed-use overlay districts in places that will provide multiple points of access to try to minimize traffic impacts in the area. The mixed-use overlay districts and the new Boston Providence zoning regulations will help to add value to the property along that Route 1 corridor. And by doing so, by increasing the value and allowing a broader range of uses to take place, we will see the commercial tax base in the town grow over time. We have a split tax rate in town, and commercial property owners pay twice as much as residential property owners. And as we see that commercial tax base grow, it will reduce the tax burden on our residential taxpayers. It will also help to provide new jobs in the future, spur economic growth along the Route 1 corridor. These will be temporary jobs for construction, and once buildings are built, there'll be new permanent employment opportunities in the area. The green strip and the additional landscaping that was approved at the February town meeting will also help to combat the impacts of climate change. Although these additional landscaped areas are not going to be large, they will, over time, as parking lots are redeveloped and properties are redeveloped along Route 1, we will see more green space and more trees. Trees help to sequester carbon and reduce the impacts of climate change. More pervious surfaces, landscaped areas will allow for more infiltration of precipitation, and that will help our water table. These are all modest benefits that we see happening from these bylaw amendments, but over time, the cumulative impact of these will help the town take measures moving forward to address the impacts of climate change. While these measures won't have a significant impact on what the world's trying to deal with climate change. It will be our part in Norwood to move forward to adjust our regulations to help to address some of the impacts of climate change. They say that we should think globally and act locally, and the adoption of these new zoning bylaw amendments will help take Norwood one step closer to being more environmentally friendly and to reduce some of the impacts of climate change. We have a number of informational sessions scheduled for our zoning amendments. The planning board and I have informational sessions scheduled for June 3rd at 5:30. That will be a virtual meeting, and you can go to the planning department and the planning board's webpage for more information, the links to those meetings. A second informational meeting will be scheduled for June 6th at 9 a.m. at the Senior Center. And a third informational session will be scheduled for June 9th at 7 p.m. And that will be another virtual meeting. The planning board will be holding a public hearing on these zoning amendments on June 1st at 7 o'clock at their planning board meeting, which will be a virtual meeting. Again, you can get links to all of these meetings at our website. And of course, if you have questions, you can always call the planning office and we'd be glad to answer any of your questions. I want to thank you for your time and look forward to the special town meeting coming up, answering any questions that you have about these zoning amendments as we go forward. Thank you.